Electric fencing. Seems complicated. It isn't. What I'm going to do today is go through the components that you need to build an electric fence, how to put them all together to make the whole thing work, and then talk a little bit about why it does what it does and how it works. Not get into too much detail, but if you've got a little bit of understanding as to how the whole thing works, then it makes things like troubleshooting a lot easier. And then when it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, you can work out why and fix it. That's good. So the first thing you need to make an electric fence work is an Energizer. And there are two different sorts of Energizer, apart from the fact that you can buy a very expensive Energizer or a very cheap Energizer. This is one of the cheaper ones, works absolutely fine. Two different sorts. One of them works on mains voltage, so for example here around the homestead I've got a little electric fence to keep out wild boar. Otherwise they get into the garden and dig the whole thing up, but it's a problem here. So the Energizer I've got here, which is in quite a bit that way in the other end of this building, that runs on mains voltage, because I've got mains voltage. The other kind runs on either mains voltage via a transformer or a battery. This is one that runs on a battery. This one I use down in the village. I've got some land down there that I used to grow potatoes on. There's no power down there, and wild boar like potatoes, so yeah. Here we have an unnecessarily large battery. This is one of the batteries out of the electric transport moped, and this is really just for illustrative purposes. But there are two types of Energizer that run off a battery. The most common one runs off a 12-volt battery, and there's another type that runs off a 9-volt battery. I bought one that runs off a 12-volt battery because I have 12-volt batteries, and if you don't have a 12-volt battery, a 12-volt battery is a lot easier to get than a 9-volt battery. You don't want one of those little 9-volt batteries that you put in your smoke detector. You want something maybe not quite as big, but at least half that size, so that it's got the capacity to run the fence for a couple of weeks. And this will run the fence that I've got down in the village for about a month. And that will vary depending upon how large the fence is and how much undergrowth you've got. Why you would want an Energizer that runs off 9 volts, I do not know. Because then you've got to buy special batteries, special big 9 volts batteries. You've also got to buy a special battery charger. This is just an ordinary bog standard battery charger. This is one of the older models. It's not one of the ones with a microprocessor in it that does all sorts of clever stuff. This is just a battery boiler. These are easy to get, these are cheap. You can get them second hand, you can find them at flea markets. You've probably got one already. A 9-volt battery charger, yeah, you've got to buy that basically from the people who make the Energizer, or who make Energizers. Yeah, you're not going to find one lying around, let's put it that way. So to my mind, 12 volt or 9 volt, choose 12 volt. It's just so much easier. If you've got a dedicated battery for your electric fence, a dedicated 12 volt battery, and something happens to that battery, it just dies, or I don't know, somebody steals it, or strange things happen. If you've got an emergency situation where you've got animals that are trying to get in or out, you can borrow a battery out of a car or something like that. You're not going to find a 9 volt battery in a hurry. You're going to have to go somewhere and get it or order it online, and that takes time. So in my mind, 12 volt all the way. That's got tangled up. There we go. These things, this is an Energizer from Voss Farming, which I think is a German company. These aren't very expensive. I think I gave about €150 for this. You can also get them second hand. If you buy one second hand, test it. You're obviously not going to have a fence to be able to test it on, but if you hook it up to a power source, you're probably not going to have a battery with you either to be able to hook it up to. But, as I said, they come with a transformer. I've never had that one out of the box, I've never run it off mains, but let's say that you hook it up to mains. And turn it on. It makes a click, click, click noise, and there's a little flashing light on it, and that means it's doing something, and that probably means it's going to work absolutely fine. If you hook it up to power and it does absolutely nothing, then it's, yeah, don't buy it. One of the strange things about these Energizers, or one of the things that I think is strange, is that they're not weatherproof. So if it rains, well, they don't have holes in them, but they're not watertight. And I don't know why they're not watertight. I think it would be very useful to have an Energizer that was watertight. The one that runs the electric fence here is under the roof. It's in a little storage room, so that's not a problem. This one, which I use in a field, yeah, that's a different matter. So what I do, I've got a post in the ground, and it's got little hangy holes on the back, so I hang it on the post, and I've got a bucket. Turn the bucket upside down, put the bucket on top of the post, and put a screw through the bucket into the post, so that the bucket isn't going to blow away. And that's how I keep mine watertight. So the edge of the bucket ends up down here somewhere, so it can't rain in, and that's worked fine. Good friend of mine, his electric fence stopped working. So I asked him what he'd done and, well, why it broke, and he said, oh, it got wet, and then he didn't really want to tell the rest of the story. In the end I got him to tell the rest of the story, and what he'd done was put his, well, he'd also used a bucket, but he put his Energizer in the bucket, and then put a lid on top of the bucket, yeah, and the lid blew off and it started to rain and the bucket filled up with water quite slowly, but he drowned his Energizer. And he's quite an intelligent person. He's got one of these jobs where he tells people what to do and gets stuff done like that, but yeah, I guess we all have bad days. So that's the Energizer. What else do we need to make this thing work? The Energizer needs to be earthed, and I'll get into why it needs to be earthed a little bit later, but for the time being what we need to know is that the Energizer needs to be earthed. So you need an earth pole. This is not an earth pole. This could be an earth pole. If it was longer it would work perfectly fine as an earth pole. You can buy earth poles, and they're about that long. They're normally 30-30 galvanised angle with a hole drilled in the end. So you can buy them, and they're not that expensive. Or if you've got 30-30 or 50-50 or whatever sort of angle or bit of profile like that, you can bang that into the ground, drill your own hole in the end, and yeah, you've got an earth. This is a bit of leftover rail from a sliding door. I don't know why I still got it, but yeah, there you go. So if this is a little bit longer, it would be perfectly fine. There's a minimum length to the earth pole. With most Energizers you need 2 earth poles, and you connect them together in series. And there's generally a minimum distance between the earth poles. And how do you work that out? Well, all of that information is in the book that you get when you buy the Energizer. If you buy a second-hand Energizer and it doesn't have a book with it, you can download it on the internet. So all of that sort of technical specifications that are specific to the Energizer, read the book or look on the internet, because it's never quite the same, but it's not very complicated. So we've got a power source, we've got our Energizer, we've got our earth. Then we need to get the power from the Energizer to the fence. And yeah, you need some wire. Any wire will do. Any wire will work. Because obviously all you're doing is conducting electricity. And wire conducts electricity, that's what it's for. There is a specific type of wire that is designed to be used with electric fence. It's a solid core wire. Most wire that you find, certainly low voltage or automotive type wire, is multi-strand. This is solid core. And it's also got shielding around it. It's a little bit like coaxial cable, and that's what you used to use to connect your TV aerial to your television set. And there's a cat outside. This is what's recommended, this is what I use. Works well. It's not very expensive. It comes on a roll that's quite long. This is all I've got left of my roll. You can put a lightning arrestor in between the Energizer and the electric fence. I've got one. They're not very expensive. I think it's a good thing to have. If you've got an electric fence that's out on a hillside somewhere, and there's just grass and sort of no trees and stuff like that, then it's going to be a really good thing to have, because the likelihood of lightning striking your electric fence is then much, much higher, because your electric fence is the highest metal object for quite a long way around. Here, we've got some buildings and the houses up there and big trees and all that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot, the likelihood of the electric fence getting struck by lightning is a lot less. But for the sake of €10, I put one in. Yeah, that's sort of up to you. You don't need it to make the fence work, that's what I'm saying. Here's a lightning arrestor in situ then. It's in series. Ow! Yep. Just touch a terminal. It's in series. So we've got the cable coming from the Energizer, which goes in on this side. Just does a bit of a loop around that. In on this side, through the lightning arrestor and out, and then it goes to the electric fence. This is the earth. And it goes down to an earth pole, which is there. So you've got your wire now that's taking a current out to your electric fence. Now you need a fence. So you need some posts to hang your wire in. There are a number of options. Well, there are three options. One option is not very good. This is the first option, and this is perfectly fine. There. Yeah, it works. This is a plastic post that's designed for electric fence, and it's very easy to install. It's got a big metal spike in the end, and you stick it in the ground and you can put your foot on these bits that stick out here and push it down. And it's a plastic post, so it's isolated, so you don't need any separate isolators. The problem with it, it's plastic, that's also a problem, because electric fence sits outside. It's often quite sunny. Electric fence often sits in the sun, and plastic doesn't like sun, so this one's starting to break here. I put my fence up 4 or 5 years ago. I bought about 10 of these just to try them out, and they work. It's a really quick way of putting up a fence, but they don't last very long, so I wouldn't buy these again. You're sort of throwing your money away, and bits of plastic break off and you've got to clean all that up, and yeah. The next thing I used was these. This is 1x1 rough sawn timber, and I've got a huge pile of these. Now I use these to, when I stack up planks to dry, I want an air gap between all the planks. So every row of planks has one of these in the middle. So I've got loads of these, and they're okay, but they're 1x1, 25mm by 25mm, so they're not very big, and they're pine. And some of them had a knot in the middle right the way through, and they just broke. I didn't notice that, they just broke off. So you want something a bit beefier than that. And then you've got your traditional fence post. This is good. This will last indefinitely. It's pressure treated. That'll last you many, many years. The reason why these two options are relevant for me is that all I'm doing is keeping out wild boar. It's very easy to keep out wild boar with an electric fence. You need one strand about 2 or 3 decimetre. I don't think that measurement exists anywhere else, does it? 20 or 30 centimetres from the ground. That's all you need to keep wild boar out. So you're not going to keep deer out of this because they'll just jump over it. And I don't think sheep would be very impressed by it either. But if you're trying to keep wild boar out, that works well. As does this. If you're trying to keep bigger animals in or out, then you want to go a bit beefier. I've started using these now. When my fence falls over with these feeble things, I've started using stuff like this. What I do is cut them in half and cut a new point on the end, so then I can get 2 posts out of one, because I don't need something that's nearly 2 metres tall. It's just not necessary. If you're using these plastic toy things, then you don't need an isolator. If you're using a wooden post, any sort of wooden post, whether it's one of these sort of Mickey Mouse things or a proper post, you need an isolator. And you need an isolator because, well, wood conducts electricity. Wood doesn't conduct electricity, but damp wood does conduct electricity. And yeah, it's quite often damp. Isolators come in a big bucket. There are 2 different types of isolator. One of them looks like that. One of them looks like that. And there's a difference. This one is for band. And this one, with a round hole in it, that's for wire. Now, if you're like me, and you didn't know the difference, and you bought the wrong one, they will still work. You can run wire through this, and you can run band through this, but it's not really how it's supposed to work. I'm a bit older and wiser, yeah, maybe, so now I know the difference. When I bought this, I didn't know the difference. If you want to put these in a post, you can just stick them in and screw them in. That works. It's quite hard work, but it works. I put up a whole fence, I put up several kilometres of fence that way, and then I found out that these things exist. And these are great. They're not very expensive. These you put in a cordless drill. Like so. And they will, yeah, you get the idea. They'll screw your isolator in for you. Yeah. If you've got several hundred or several thousand of those to put in, this is a lot easier. It'll save you a lot of time and your hands will thank you. Okay, isolators. And we'll get back to, well, get on to why isolators are important a little bit later on. And then the last thing in this little section then is how you construct your fence. Obviously the way that you construct your fence, how high it is, how many wires you have in it, all that sort of stuff even how much power you need from your Energizer, that is going to depend on what you need to keep in or out. But all of these principles, they all apply. The last thing is how you're going to construct your fence. There's a misconception, a very common misconception, that the fence has to go around in a loop. So, illustrate it with this. This is a piece of black wire that probably doesn't show up particularly well. But the very common misconception is that the fence must go around in a circle, otherwise it won't work. And I can sort of understand why you think that, because we're building a circuit here, and circuits go around in a loop. And obviously there is a circuit involved here, but the circuit isn't the fence itself. You can build a fence like that. So you can go from here to here and build a fence if you wanted to. I don't know why you'd want to build a fence that's less than a metre long, but you could, and it would work. So, not a problem with that. Your fence doesn't have to make a complete loop. If you've got a gate, you don't have to complete the loop over the gate opening. I'd recommend that you do that. I've done that here. I've got my gates down there. That's my driveway up. And I dug a trench, which is pretty difficult because it's been a driveway for I think the last 100 years, so the gravel was pretty packed. I dug a bit of a trench, put a wire in to connect the loop. Because my loop here is about 1 kilometre long. So if the loop breaks all the way that way behind the house, then one side of the electric fence isn't going to have power. So it's a bit more fail-safe if you do have a loop. But if you can't make a loop, or you don't want a loop, you don't have to have a loop. It's drawing time. Here's a post, here's a post, an isolator, and a fence wire. This is the smallest electric fence you can build, and this distance here can be anything. It can be really small. It can be 2 inches. Yeah, I don't know why you'd want that, but you could build that and it would work. What I'm getting at here is that, like a bird's eye view of a field, let's say that this is a field, it's a square field, you've got to build a fence all the way around. Or you can build a fence on one side, or 2 sides, and your fence can stop there and there. The ends of the fence do not need to be connected. So my homestead, or my piece of land, is a bit of a funny shape. It goes round something like that. And the house is up here, and the workshop's down here, and I've got a gate here. And here's my driveway. Something like that. So the gate here then, that represents a break in the fence, and that's not a problem. My Energizer sits in the end of this building, and the power goes out to the fence. So the power goes this way to the gate, and then all the way around and back to the other side of the gate. And that's not a problem. That works, you can do that. What I've done is, as I said, I've buried a wire under the driveway that connects the fence. So my fence is a loop all the way around. And the reason why I've done that is that if the fence breaks up here, if a moose comes along and trips over the fence, and this has happened, and breaks the band up here, if I didn't have this link here, then only this half of the fence would have power going to it. This half of the fence wouldn't have power going to it. As it is now a complete loop, if the fence breaks up here, this part still has power going to it because the power is coming around this way. So you don't have to make a complete loop, but as you see, there is an advantage to making a complete loop. I'm talking about gates. What do you do with the gate openings? I've done nothing with my gate opening because the wild boars apparently don't go through the gates. And that's a little bit risky because maybe one day they're going to, and then they'll be stuck inside because there's electric fence all the way around. But I'll worry about that if it happens. What you can do with a gate is one of these big springy things. That goes from one side to the other, and this will be live. There'll be power in this. Now what you need there is a special type of isolator that insulates the big springy gate thing from the posts, but energizes it. And that's these things here. Okay, so to illustrate how the whole thing works, let's build a fence. Here I've got two posts, just screwed into the side of the bench. These are isolators. One there. And one there. And then we need the end. Where is the end? Here we go. Found a whole roll of it. Here's a fence. Obviously not very long, and building a fence this short would be quite pointless, but if that's all the electric fence you want, you can do it. It does not have to go around in a loop. And there we've got our Energizer. Connect that up there. It's a bit bent. There we go. That's lived kind of a hard life out in the field, so it's not new. There we connect to our power source. That's clicking and flashing, so we know that's going to work. And then we need an earth. So here's our earth pole. That's connected. Now, this right now is a functioning electric fence. Or at least it would be. If this was outside and that earth pole was bashed into the ground, it would be a functioning electric fence. It's not in here. And it's not a functioning electric fence in here because this bench, it's dry wood, this is not conductive. The ground is conductive. The ground conducts electricity. So that's why we can't make a functioning electric fence here, despite the fact that we've got all the components and everything's hooked up. So, how does it work? What we've got is a circuit. We've got positive from the battery going out into the Energizer, we've got the red cable here, that's a positive from the Energizer. That's going into the fence. Now we've got power in the fence. And then there's a gap. And then the circuit continues. The ground pole up this ground wire, which is obviously also red but doesn't matter. Back to the Energizer and back to the other side of the battery. So we've got a circuit, but we've got an incomplete circuit. So what we need now is an animal. Yeah. Okay, you'll do. Right, here's our animal. Oh, not a very cooperative animal. So the animal, oh, the animal's gone. The animal is standing on the ground, the animal is earthed to the ground and then comes in contact with the fence. And the animal then completes the circuit. So that means that we've got power going from one side of the battery all the way through the circuit, through the Energizer, up here to the fence, through the animal, which completes the circuit, to the ground, from the ground up the ground post. The animal's making noise. And then back to the Energizer. So the animal becomes a part of the circuit, the electricity passes through the animal, and that obviously creates a reaction in that animal. Anyone who's ever been shocked will know. It doesn't exactly hurt, but it's really quite unpleasant. So you're gonna, yeah, whatever it is that's got against your fence is going to move, because it's not fun. It's not really a sensation of pain, it's just quite unpleasant. So that's how it works. Simply explained with an uncooperative cat. This is then why the isolators are so important. The only thing that should complete the circuit then is an animal that comes and presses against the fence. If your power is going down your posts and into the ground, then you're losing all your power that way. That is not going to end well. The same thing happens if there's a windy day and a bit of branch blows off a tree and it lands on your fence. This bit of branch, it's almost certainly going to be damp, it's going to have moisture content, so that's going to lead some of the electricity to ground. Now, a damp stick, it's slightly conductive, but not very conductive. So you're going to lose a little bit of power, but not a significant amount. It's worse if you get a big branch that falls down and presses your fence down so that it touches the ground. That's a significant loss. Also, grass. It's the middle of winter, I don't have any grass. This is a piece of grass. You get grass growing up against the fence. That will decrease the power of the fence. It's not a massive problem. You go back to the instruction book that comes with your Energizer, it'll tell you how much grass you can have before it'll stop working, in sort of loose terms. So for example, I don't know, it'll say maybe 4 kilometres with thick grass and 8 kilometres with less thick grass, something like that. It'll give you some sort of frame of reference to know how much grass you can have growing up in your fence before you need to go out and clip it. Again, read the manual. The last things that you might need, these are optional. Yes, optional. Depending upon where you live, there might be a law, or a bylaw or something like that, that says that you need to have a sign that warns people that you've got an electric fence. There is a law here that says that you have to have one of these signs every 60 metres. That's obviously going to vary depending on where you live. Whether or not there is a law that says you need to have a sign to warn people that you've got an electric fence, it is quite nice. I think it's kind of a nice thing to do. Anybody who knows anything about electric fences can immediately spot one, but not everybody can. A couple of different options. They're all plastic these days. This one's a bit more robust, and it's got it in about 10 different languages. This one's got it in Swedish and Swedish. They're both plastic. The idea is that you hang them on the wire. So they've got two holes at the top. This is obviously broken. It's been out in the sun and it's plastic, and plastic's a bit rubbish. It's got a hole in it because it's been out in the sun and it's plastic. You used to be able to get these in metal, tin signs, and they don't exist anymore because everything's plastic and it breaks. What I did, I got tired of these falling off and blowing around and not being where they're supposed to be. Cut a piece of wood, nailed that to the fence post, and nailed this to the bit of wood, so it wasn't flapping in the wind anymore. And they've stayed up so far. But one day I'd like to find some antique ones in tin, so that I'm going to put them up and they'll be up for the rest of my lifetime. These you have to chase around. And the last thing you can have, if you want, again optional, is a little blinking lamp. And one end of the lamp hooks onto the wire, your fence wire, the other end is earthed with a spike down in the ground. And when your voltage drops in the fence, it'll warn you, it'll start to flash. So I use one of these. I go out and check the fence sometimes. This is a Electro fence checker, very, very cheap. You hold it against a wire, push a button on it, and it'll light up and tell you that you've got power going to it. There are much more advanced models that will tell you exactly how much power you've got going through your fence. Yeah, this is a cheap one. And that's how it works, and a little bit about why it works. Power source, Energizer, ground posts, normally 2, sometimes 1, posts of some description, and a third option which I didn't get to. The third option is to take these isolators and screw them right into a tree. That does work. It's not great practice to screw stuff into trees, and if you leave them there for a long time the tree will grow around the isolator and into the fence. Not ideal, and don't screw stuff into trees. So isolator and then your fence wire. You can use this band. There are advantages to using a band. For example, I am trying to keep out wild boar. They can see this band. They're smart animals, they see the band, they think, oh, electricity. The disadvantage of band is it breaks. It doesn't break easily, but it does break. It will break in the end. It's plastic with metal woven into it. The plastic will break down. Wire, a lot stronger, not visible, more difficult to work with. So advantages and disadvantages to that. Hopefully I've demystified things a little bit. It's really not difficult. When I put my fence up, yeah, I wasn't looking forward to it because I thought, yeah, this is going to be difficult. I thought it's also going to cost a lot of money. It didn't. Everything you see on the table here, on the bench here, with the exception of the battery, I think about €200. Obviously not a half metre of band, I mean like 2 kilometres of band. But everything you need to make this work you can get very, very cheaply, is what I'm trying to say. Doesn't cost a lot of money, very effective. Okay, that's what I got now. See you next time.